Welcome to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. This podcast is a safe place to connect with other NICU moms by listening to interviews with trauma-informed medical and maternal mental health experts, remarkable stories from the NICU, and intentional roundtable conversations.
Our hope is that you feel like you're sitting across the table from another NICU sister and feel seen and validated in your experience. No matter where you are on your healing journey, this podcast is here to remind you that you are not alone. Welcome to the sisterhood.
Welcome back to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. It is summer. We are all in summer mode, which means that all I want to do is be outside in my garden. But I am very excited to be here on the podcast with you all today. So, Aisha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Also enjoying summer and enjoying watching your progress of your little flower bed. That looks like it's a lot of fun.
Yes. Oh my gosh, my zinnias are so tall. I'm so excited. I'm just excited for them to bloom now. I'm like that garden person in the morning with my coffee, like looking up close at them, taking pictures.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that you are finally getting around to doing that because I know that's been the dream of yours.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. Enjoy
It's been
it.
very fun.
Today we have a really special guest that I'm really excited to learn more about and hear her journey. So do you want to introduce our guest today, Ashley?
Yes, I do. We have the honor and pleasure today of having the one and only Ashley O'Neill on the podcast. And she came highly recommended from a dear friend of ours, Ebony Ford. She's been on our podcast a couple of times, and I reached out to her and I was like, who in your network would be just a fantastic guest? And she immediately was like, Ash. So we are so excited to have Ashley on the podcast today. Even as we were putting together her questions and just reading more about her story, I was like so eager to have this episode and just to hear more of the details of her baby story. So Ashley, welcome so much to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm just excited to be here. I'm looking forward to chatting with you both.
Well, we're all moms, and so the fact that we're here at 8:30 Central Time, honestly, I'm really impressed with us. I feel like we need to all treat ourselves to a coffee after this, just to be like, pat on the back, you did it.
Yes, absolutely. But it's so exciting. I'm really grateful that you are here, and I know that it's going to be just a tremendous source of hope for a lot of mamas in our community just to hear your story. We always say how much healing can come from just hearing your story through someone else. And so we hope that that's the case today. We know it will be. And so I was thinking maybe we can get started with just a little bit of background. Maybe, we like to start these interviews with pregnancy and like family building, right? What was your vision of growing your family, and a little bit of your pregnancy? Was it a normal, quote unquote, normal pregnancy? Were there any complications? And if so, when did those arise?
Awesome. Okay, so I got married roughly like 10 years ago, and my husband, we used to always joke that he has a master's, I have a master's, that our kids had to be at least doctors or PhDs or something with like some type of terminal degree. And so like 2 years into our marriage, we got pregnant with our eldest son, who I delivered at 21 weeks gestation. And unfortunately, there's nothing they can do. So he was born alive, and then his name was Vinson, died shortly afterwards. And then it took us a while before we decided if we wanted to get pregnant again. You go through like all of those emotions, like, we did everything the quote unquote like right way. We waited till we were done with like school. We had good jobs, and we're married. And then all of a sudden, the baby that you hoped and prayed for dies. And then he's like, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah.
And then so it took us, so that was like 2016. And so it took us a while. We got pregnant with my Kolin, and, we had a little bit more frequent checks just because of, our previous loss. And then everything was going okay. And then here he comes at 25 weeks gestation. But luckily we made it that extra, 4 weeks. So now he had a chance of survival.
Thank you for sharing Vincent with us. I lost my firstborn, Enzo, and so I definitely resonate with that part of the story, and just the fear that can come with having a pregnancy after loss. Enzo was 24 weeks, and then my Ava was 26 weeks. So even that of like, this is happening again, you know, you go into it thinking there's no way this is going to be different, and sometimes it's not. And so to reconcile that and to be in it, right? I think there's this like pull that happens where you're like, I can't believe that this is happening to me again. And you're also like, I'm so grateful that, you know, she's doing okay and that she has a better chance of survival than my first. And so it's just this constant mix of conflicting emotions of gratefulness and also just angry and grieving all that could have been. You're kind of living what you weren't able to live with your first. And so thank you so much for just sharing him and sharing that part of your story. I know that that can be also very difficult. And so I appreciate that, and sharing that perspective of having a pregnancy after a loss. And I was wondering if you can maybe just touch a little bit about how you navigated that with your pregnancy with Kolin. What were the emotions that were kind of arising as you were pregnant with Kolin?
At first, it was hard to kind of get excited because you know, it's possible, right? First time you're pregnant, you think, oh, you know, nothing but like roses, everything's going to go great. But once you've experienced the loss, it's like nothing is off the table. And my husband had a hard time. He didn't want to celebrate. He didn't want to get too happy. And so that was kind of like an emotional pull, because I'm like, can you take this photo? And he's like, I don't really want to, but okay. Yeah. So that part was like hard. And I didn't want to. So after Vinson died, I kind of start sharing like my story like online. And when I was pregnant with Kolin, I didn't want to initially. I was like secretly like writing down stuff, and I was like, okay, once this pregnancy goes to term and everything is going to be, you know, well, like I'll have like this information, like pregnancy after loss. This is kind of how you navigate it. And then for Kolin to come early, I'm like, you lost the first baby. Like, why can't the second baby go to term?
Yeah.
So it's just like that emotional pull. Like, come on.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
For sure. No, you bring up such a good point of just feeling like when you're, because I remember my pregnancy was high risk, but it felt like so vulnerable to share any updates, because I just was like, am I jinxing myself if I celebrate this publicly? Like, now people are expecting me to go full term. What if I don't? And it was like all this stuff, and just how vulnerable it can be to share about our pregnancies, especially when you're reading other updates of other people that are having just like such an entirely different experience than yourself. And so, you know, to other moms that are here that are like, I just don't want to share, just know that that's very normal, because it feels so vulnerable to open yourself publicly and to really be like, this is what's happening in my life, and anything can happen tomorrow, but this is what's happening today. And so did the doctors ever have any, you know, answers to why you delivered early, or was it a complete, you know, unexpected experience for both of your babies?
Cervical incompetence.
Okay.
So for the second one, we did a little bit more frequent checks.
Okay.
But everything seemed to be going well until it was too late for a cerclage.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, and so could you tell us a little bit then about, so you're pregnant with Kolin, and then all of a sudden, was there a point in your pregnancy where it was like, okay, I think he's coming? Like, what was his delivery like and leading up to his arrival into the world?
It's like 25 weeks. My husband's at work. I kind of felt uneasy. And so I primarily stayed like downstairs, but I was like, I'm smelly. I need to go take a shower. So I go upstairs, and then all of a sudden, like my mucus plug comes out. And I'm a nurse, but I still Google, because I was like, no way.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what does a mucus plug look like? And I'm like, And so I called my husband, and luckily, because he works on a secure lab on base, luckily he just so happened to be in his car. And I was like, I need to drive myself to the hospital. He was like, no, I'll be there in like 10 minutes. Just wait. And so the plan was, once I arrived to, like, mind you, I live in a rural area. So this is like 100-bed less hospital. They have no NICU. They don't even have a nursery. This is the type of hospital you go to if your delivery, like your pregnancy is going well, like no concerns.
Sure.
And so like once I get there, mind you, this is the hospital I was a floor nurse with for like 7 years.
Okay.
The year before I had just transitioned to like a nurse practitioner to like an outside office. And so I get to the hospital, they wheel me up to like the triage of like the OBGYN, and the plan was to fly me out to a bigger hospital. And then all of a sudden, the nurse yells, I don't remember exactly, but, something's not right. Next thing you know, the anesthesiologist is telling, my husband to like, come on, let's get you ready. It happened so quickly that the doctor who should have been like delivering me actually was pulled into like another C-section. And luckily, there was another OBGYN who was just like around the corner at her office, like 5 minutes away. So I'm literally in the OR waiting to be put to sleep. Like,
oh my gosh.
Waiting on her just to, wash in and like scrub in. And so when I come to, like, I'm looking up, I'm scared to say anything. And, I'm looking around like the nursing supervisor at the hospital. There is my friend. Like, I'm seeing like all these people. And I had previously been like a nursing supervisor at the hospital. So I'm looking at like all these people who know me.
Yeah.
And one of the medical assistants like reached down and she was like, your baby's okay. Your baby's okay. But I'm like scanning the room. I don't see my husband. Later come to find out they would not let him in. I think just because of the whole situation, 25-weeker. They don't have the skill set in this hospital to care for Kolin. And so when I finally came to, I told my husband like, hey, go get a picture. Let me see Kolin. They were not able to intubate Kolin, so they did manual breaths for an hour.
Oh my goodness.
Until the flight team arrived from a bigger hospital.
Wow.
And so when my husband shows me this picture, it's like my little skinny, frail baby, and the mask is like right here. So he just caught like the face before the mask touches. And my first thought was like, my baby isn't gonna live. And then fast forward a little bit, like a couple hours later, the flight team from Georgetown came. And, they're giving me like the quick and dirty spill, like your baby's going to get flown to Georgetown now. They will him in this little tiny portable like incubator. And so they let me like touch him, and I'm like shaking him, like trying to like barely touch him. And so they give me like the spill, and then the social worker comes in and was like, okay, we're going to talk to your insurance to see if we can transfer you up like the next day. And so he gets flown that day, and then when they leave, I was like, okay, take this Foley out. I don't need any of this. Like, I'm getting them out of here. Like, I have stuff to do. And then so the next day, like, I followed suit with, like, via ground transportation to the bigger hospital.
Wow. What a crazy arrival. So had you, being a nurse or just in your life, known any 25-weeker stories?
No, like, I had heard, like, late term. Like, I'd seen late-term babies, I should say, but I had never, and I was still within, like, my first year of being a family nurse practitioner, so I saw kids of all ages, but I hadn't even seen anybody that tiny.
Yeah. Well, and you had such a unique experience of, just right from the bat, your baby's on a plane, like, it's more common to be, like, a floor or two away, let alone you're putting your baby on a plane. And I empathize with that fear. My son was put on a plane 3 days after he was born, or no, 10 days after he was born, I'm sorry. But I had those 10 days to at least see him and establish some sort of a connection, but to just all of a sudden send your baby on a plane would be absolutely terrifying. And so, when you were able to go there, did you almost feel like when you saw him again the second time that was when you really had a chance to meet him? Because your first meeting was so fast. It was so he's going on a plane. So what was it like to meet him at the NICU? Was it a different experience because he was intubated, or, what was going through your mind when you had the chance to see him again in the NICU?
So I went up via ground transportation the following day. And then once they got me settled in my room, I was like, okay, I'm walking over to the NICU. And I'm wobbling around. And I'm scared to peer around the corner to see my baby. And then there was a lady at the time. She was the occupational therapist there. I love her to this day. But I'm scared to like peek in to see like what am I gonna see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Colin was like moving and like, and I was like, oh, okay, we're okay.
Okay.
Okay, so it's kind of like a sign of relief, but then you take in the surroundings because he was in an open bay NICU, so it's like 35 babies in this huge room.
Yeah.
And he's in the section that I refer to as like 25-weeker row. So it was
Sure.
25-weekers on each side in this little section. And so I'm looking around and I was like, oh, this doesn't look too good.
Right. Yeah. It is like a very surreal experience when you're in that open bay NICU and you're seeing your baby, and then you're also seeing so many other NICU babies, and you're just taking in that environment for the first time. And you're like, okay, this is our new home for the next however long. And it's a very overwhelming experience to really take it in for the very first time. And so what were they, initially telling you about Colin? I mean, what were some of the first things that they were kind of letting you know about him, and how did he handle the flight?
I don't think there were any issues on the flight. Initially, it was like the honeymoon stage. Everything was fine.
Sure. Yeah.
If they were telling me like, hey, expect him to at least be here by his due date, a couple of days, we're going to do like a head ultrasound. And then a couple of days later, oh, Colin has brain bleeds. At first, I want to say it was like grade like 1 and 3. And I was like, my husband like, oh, okay, that's okay, whatever, fine. And then it was like, we made arrangements to stay because it's like 2 hours away from my home for like the first like 2 weeks. And so we're in the NICU like every day for 2 weeks. And then, he has the brain bleeds look like they're getting worse, but they're in a spot that we don't know what that means. Like we never really seen a brain bleed there. We don't know what it means, good or bad. And so when we finally get in the car to drive home to get clean clothes, as soon as we didn't even pull in the driveway before like the resident calling or the fellow's calling. The brain bleeds are worse. It's 3 and 4, and he has hydrocephalus. So we have to monitor. We're just like, I can't even get into my house. I can't even take a nice hot shower.
Right.
So that was just like overwhelming. It's like you couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And I described it like I felt like I was like free falling for like months.
Yeah.
And then to your comment earlier, like being in the NICU is with all these babies is traumatic because, I'm sitting there holding my baby. I'm crying for my baby. And then I'm crying and praying for somebody else's baby.
Yeah.
So then I'm crying for their mom. Then I'm crying for myself. It's just like a never ending like cycle.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh man. So after they kind of told you like, okay, we have this brain bleed, we have hydrocephalus, like what was some of the next steps and what were they kind of preparing you for as you kind of kept going on your NICU journey?
So first they were like tapping like the soft spot. So putting a needle directly into the soft spot and withdrawing like fluid. And so then, I'll be there watching and I'm trying to like look at the color because the redder it is the more protein, which is the worse the bleeds. And so I'm like watching each time and then I'm taking pictures and then I'm trying to
your
like
nurse
say,
brain is coming out.
Like which one's lighter, which one's darker. And he had to do that until he weighed enough to get what's called like a reservoir. And so then they can just tap the reservoir. And then they're telling you like, hey, well, first back up a little bit. They had tried to do like a LP, like a lumbar puncture to see if they can get fluid. So that way they can tell like how bad it is. And they didn't get any fluid the first time. So I'm like, okay, he's going to need a reservoir. He's going to need a shunt. A couple of days later, they wanted to try it again. And I was like, if it didn't work the first time, like what are the odds it's working this time? Like I'm smart enough to realize you're just doing this, right?
Yeah.
And they was like, we just want to try. I was like, okay, whatever. It's not going to work. And they didn't get anything. So then we had to transition to like the reservoir and then later the shunt. And then by then, I had transitioned back to work when Colin was still 2 months into his 6th month NICU there. Colin was not a cry. He was aware of he was looking at his surroundings. He was pulling out, he was extubating himself. But the nurse I called to check on him one day and the nurse said, Colin's kind of fussy, he's whiny. And he has a low grade fever. It was like 99 point, something that in the grand scheme of things, if it was a neurotypical baby, you wouldn't care. I was like, his shunt is infected. I know it. I know it. And so I called my husband. And mind you, I was the default parent. Like, I was there primarily most of the time. He had transitioned back to work. We would do like monthly family or weekly family meeting where he would like call in and I would be there. And so I called him. And so the truck that we had was too big his truck was too big for like the fire construction. Next thing I know, he's at my job. He's trading cars and he's on the road up to Georgetown. And he sent me pictures. It looked horrible. And he was like, so then my husband, why don't you guys need to tap him. It's not blah, blah. It's you need to tap him. You need to do this. And so, but they didn't do it until the following day.
Okay.
It turns out it was infected. So they had to remove it and put like what's called like an external drain. And because it's hooked up to gravity, because he needed IV antibiotics, like strong ones for like 10 days. And because it's hooked up to gravity, you can't really move him. And so I wasn't able to even hold him for at least like 5 days. And I was surrounded by like nurses because by then I got to the point where like I'm sneaking, I'm suctioning myself, I'm moving him in and out. Like, leave me alone, I'll do what I want to do. But they had to literally like put a pillow on my lap and sit him on the pillow and I couldn't move. That was the point like we're having the conversation. Like, by then they already told me like Kolin probably wouldn't be able to like walk, talk. They didn't think he was ever going to be able to hold his secretions on his own by then. The majority of the doctors. There were some that was showing you stories of babies that had like bilateral brain bleeds. And then Kolin does have like PVLs. He has like multiple PVLs. Like how they went on to have like successful lives. My husband was a engineer. So you already know engineers see black and white. They don't see, there's no gray, there's no room for anything extra. And so it was hard for me to like have hope. So I had a conversation with Kolin. I was like, I will fight for you as long as you want to fight. But if you want to go, you can go. And I think the next day he like extubated himself. So I was like, okay, we're good. But that was like the hardest conversation I've had with anyone.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to go, you can go.
Isn't that what like a mother's love is the surrender ultimately of knowing that these precious babies that come from us grew in us and that we get to take care of. Ultimately, they aren't ours. Once they're out in the world, all we can do is just love them and be there for them. But also ultimately it's like, I feel like a mother's love, especially after experiencing loss, it's that surrender of like, you are your own person and I love you with my whole heart and I'm gonna surrender to you and just let you be who you're gonna be. And Kolin said, I'm a fighter and I want to fight. And I know how hard that is. And that kind of answered my question. Is there still that fear, right? Are we going to do this? Are we going to make it? I can't imagine. You said that was 3 months into your 6-month journey. What a journey, right? To be every day just not knowing what the day is going to hold, and how you're going to be met when you walk in those doors. And, I imagine you walking in and scared to like look and see what am I going to meet, and how that must have felt like every day you're going in holding your breath. How am I going to see my son today? Right? Like, what's he going to need from me today? So I just see that, and I see the courage right off the bat that you demonstrate. And it is such a remarkable journey already so far, what you've shared with us.
Well, and I would love to, we don't have this question on the sheet here, but you lose your first baby. You're in the NICU. You're kind of in this like unknown, you're having conversations with Kolin of, if you're tired and you need to let go, I'm here with you. I wonder what it was like to build a bond with him. Would you be willing to share a little bit? Because one thing we talk about often is that as NICU moms, sometimes it feels really vulnerable to fully bond with our babies because the next day feels so uncertain, and it's so hard to sometimes get attached to this little baby that you love with all your heart, not knowing what the next day will hold. And so what was it like for you as you were building a bond with Colin and as you were getting to know him with so many unknowns surrounding him?
I didn't take a single day for granted.
Yeah.
It was like, I remember when I didn't hold him until day 10. And one of the nurses came. She was like, okay, Mom, it's time for you to hold your baby. And I was like, is it going to make his brain bleeds worse? It's like,
Right, yeah.
no, Mom, you need to hold him and he needs to be held. And so,
Yeah.
like, each time for like the cares, you know, if it would, you know, they rotate between cares every 3 hours versus every 4. I would make sure when it was time for me to hold him, like I had my bladder was empty. I had my snacks. I had the
Yes.
mirror. I had whatever I needed because I was not moving until they told me to, like, it was time to, like, you know, put him back in the incubator. And it was like each and every day, it's like, this is my baby. I don't know how much time we're going to have with him. And I understand loss, so I need to cherish each and every moment. And there was that time, like, after he had his first MRI, you know, like when you're looking at the brain and you see, like, the folds in the brain, those are a sign of, like, cognitive ability, intelligence, things like that. The first MRI, Colin didn't have any. And they didn't know if it was because of so much trauma at birth that it was just taking over, the brain was just working on healing itself and then it would eventually grow, or if they were never going to grow and it was just going to be like his quality of life. And there was a time, like, we were having a family meeting and we were discussing, like, where to go from there, when to do the repeat MRI. We all decided on, like, let's just give it 2 weeks and we'll go from there. And so one day I'm sitting there holding Colin, and mind you, this was like a week into that 2-week period. The attending goes and he's like, okay, we're going to get the MRI tonight. And I'm like, why? I still have another week. And he goes, well, I think your husband's really anxious to know what it says. I was like, I don't care what anybody says. You're not giving. We're going to do this in a week. Matter of fact, don't tell me any bad news for this week. I just want to sit here and I want to enjoy my baby. I want to sing. I want to read to him. I want to give him a bath. Like, don't tell me anything. Don't even come over here. And so that week, like, I have pictures of me, like, bathing Colin, reading him the same books over and over, just, like, enjoying him. Because I didn't know what the MRI was going to say and what that meant for him.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And I think gives moms, like, that permission they need to not be afraid to build that bond and to become even more attached, right? Like, and I think it gives moms permission to really just to soak it in, because it can feel so vulnerable and so scary. But really, like, at the end of the day, it's like you said, we just, as NICU moms, we don't take anything for granted. And so I'm so proud of you for fighting for that and advocating for that week of just like, nope, we're just gonna I'm just gonna be mom to Collins, and that is what we're doing. And so after they did the second MRI, was, you know, did his brain bleed improve? Like, what was kind of the next half of his NICU stay leading up to discharge?
There were more folds, like, they started to grow, but because he had so much damage, it's, if you see Colin and then you see its MRI, they're not the same person.
Wow. Yeah.
Because the MRI looks bad. I'm not even going to lie to you.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what was kind of, you know, leading up to his discharge then? What were some of, like, the boxes that needed to be checked in order for you guys to go home?
We needed to work out home health nursing. So after he was born, we didn't have any idea. So we put him under both insurances. I kept calling. Neither insurance would cover home health nursing.
And
I was like, I'm going to have to work. So I transitioned back to work while he was still in the NICU. But the plan was to, once he came home, stay home for like 6 weeks, get him settled, and then go back to, because we didn't have any idea, like, how these bills were going to work. We didn't have any idea. And so we had a family friend who has a kid with complex medical needs. So he's like, hey, can we treat you to coffee? Can we, like, pick your brain? And so that's how we found out about some of the programs that the hospital never told me about. So there is a program that, because I knew once he got discharged, our income was going to come into play, and that he's going to get kicked out of off of the Medicaid. And so he was like, oh, my son is on this program called, like, the Model Waiver program, where, you get to keep Medicaid for life, or, unless he outgrows the program. Or till they're 18, they're transition over to, their own disability.
Mm-hmm.
And then they give you like special programs, like you're eligible for like different grants. Just like so many things that I didn't know about. So I'm calling this lady and she's like, okay, well, now that you're in the hospital, you need to sign up for the RIM program now. So the rare and expensive case management. So this is going to bridge you because you're already in there. You're already in the hospital. You already have Medicaid. So once you get discharged, it's going to put you at the top of the model waiver list. Mind you, there's only 300 slots for the model waiver program in the state of Maryland. So it bridged me over. And she was like, well, keep calling me, fill out this application and keep calling me so I could make sure you're on my radar. I call that lady every week. I found the application for the RIM program. I filled out what I could and I dropped it off to the NICU. And luckily, he got approved like the week before he was discharged. It was like,
oh my gosh,
seamless.
Yeah.
And so that was in place. That you had to find the, the nursing, the home health agency, like the nursing, and then kind of work out like my schedule with like my job.
Sure.
So it's more of like those type of logistics. I figured I'm a nurse. I could figure out how to use a G-tube,
right.
Sure.
That part didn't bother me. It was more like, and then finding like physical therapy, like all of this stuff that he's going to need.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's more just becoming organized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And coming up with the system.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thank goodness that you had someone to kind of reach out to like get some knowledge from. It just makes me think of like how valuable those resources are, to be able to like say, I have no idea what to do. And like you said, sometimes for whatever reason, the hospitals are not the greatest at like sharing all the resources that are available to you. And so just grateful that you had someone to reach out to say, hey, how do I do this? And I know that also, asking for help can be also like a very vulnerable thing to say, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Cause I think also as NICU moms, we want to be like, we got it all figured out. Like this is the one area that we need to just know what to do and take charge and just like be excellent. And I think that just being able to ask for help and say, hey, I am lost here. I don't know what to expect, is just something that I hope like any mom listening right now who feels a little bit out of sorts, like I have no idea what to do and what my life is going to look like, to also give herself permission to say, I'm just going to reach out and see if anyone else who has done this before me can just give me a little guidance. And I think that's why I love our Facebook group. I think I see every day just post after post coming in saying, help, I don't know, what do I expect, and so just grateful that you had someone in your life that could kind of point you a little bit in a direction to say, like, these resources are available, you should definitely use them, and that it all worked out so seamlessly right before discharge.
I'll add that a lot of the hospitals, like our NICU, did a great job caring for us there. They had like a lot of mental health services, but they were not prepared for when people leave. They have no idea. They had never heard of those programs. One of the social workers told me that that I couldn't leave. When I had a home health nurse, I couldn't leave her in the house with Kolin. So I was like, what do I need her for if I can't leave?
Right.
Like, I need to be able to work.
Yeah.
So it's like, they have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. For sure. So as you guys were preparing for discharge and discharge day comes, like, how are you and your husband feeling? How was, were you excited, nervous, anxious, all of the above? Like, what was kind of going through your head as you were coming home?
All of the above. You kind of wonder, like, do you have what it takes?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's going to be a hard journey. You know it's going to be hard. Like, it's no question. And then the NICU one of the NICU doctors that was going to be discharging us wanted to make sure like home health nursing was like set up that night before. And I was like, no, I don't want anybody in my house the night before, I just wanted to be us three.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't too happy, but whatever. And so just like and then our discharge day got pushed back a day. So like, you know, we do the overnight, we're prepared to leave. Everything just wasn't squared away with like the insurance with the home health nursing. So he was like, please don't leave. I know you don't want anybody that's the night of, but please don't leave until everything's set up. I was like, okay. So that pushed everything back by a day. But just like the drive home, you know, the packing up, the saying goodbyes, because it's like, yes, it's a dysfunctional family, but the NICU is your family for 6 months. So it's like, can you do this by yourself?
Yeah.
And then what happens, you know, I'm home for 6 weeks, but what happens when I'm transitioning back to work? And I was working 10-hour days. So that happened because I knew most of the specialists were in DC, which is a 2-hour drive. And so I knew I needed a day off where it's just appointments. So I would, you know, I'm working all day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. Well, we're going to have long days on Thursdays with the drive to just kind of put in our schedule together, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that kind of brings us to a good part in the episode where kind of our focus for the months of June and July is just life after NICU. And I think you just described it really well when you called Thursday your days off, because as NICU moms, there's no day off. It's like, okay, the one day off I have from work is going to be appointments with a 2-hour drive. And so, you know, we want to touch a little bit on just like the reality of life after NICU for many of us in our community. And so, you know, what did life after NICU look for you guys? I know you had the appointments on Thursdays, you had home health nurse. I mean, what was it like to step into this new part of motherhood outside of the NICU, but also kind of have these like extracurriculars, if you will, on top of being a mom?
It's a couple of months of like, you can't breathe. Your mind is constantly running. It's still running 5 years later, but constantly running like, what am I missing? What do I need to do? Who do I need to call? You're getting organized. And then it's weird just having somebody in your house all the time. Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
And then it's just like, you know, and so I'm a family nurse practitioner. So going to work all day, taking care of normal, healthy babies that are the same age as my baby. And then, you know, coming home, taking care of my sick baby. It's beyond hard. It's like you're trying to reconcile, like, why do they get and obviously you don't want anybody to have sick babies.
Of course,
How do you reconcile taking care of normal, healthy babies and moms are coming in like, oh, my baby's constipated. And your mind was like, well, my baby just had brain surgery. So it's kind of hard to mentally balance. But it's like you can't even deal with like all of the trauma that you face in the NICU because it's still like ongoing.
Yeah.
You're still getting traumatized daily. And then when my story is a little different because then when my son was home for 7 months, my husband died unexpectedly. So it's it's one thing being able to balance everything, even if you're the default with another parent, but now you're like solely responsible for everything beyond hard. And so now you're like grief after grief after grief because it was a 4-year span. So my Vinson died May 2nd, 2016. Kolin, born April 2019. My husband died May 2020. So exactly 4 years to the month from when my Vinson died. So it's like trying to survive.
Yeah.
And then throw in COVID. So
I'm so sorry.
That's so much grief in a span of 4 years' time, like you mentioned. And then to be in that place of survival mode and not even have really the capacity to process everything that's happening in your life and the grief that is so big in your life. And if you feel comfortable, when did you begin to really process everything that you were navigating? I mean, what did that journey look like for you?
Probably last year.
Yeah.
So, because after my husband died, it was COVID. So I took 3 months off of work, but it was like, you can't go anywhere. You got this sick kid. And it's like, I didn't realize how depressed I was until I came out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to a year later, like I was still kind of depressed, but a friend had sent me like a text message like, hey, Ashley, go outside, look at the sun. And afterwards, I just started taking like 3-mile walks. I think Colin and I walk like 3 or 4 times a day, just like I live near like a pond and just feeling the sun. And then I started like writing more and journaling. Just for me, healing comes through the pen. And kind of sharing my story. So then I started sharing more of our journey. Because when someone tells you, like, yes, life is hard now, but one day it'll get better. If they've never been through anything, you're like, okay, whatever. Like, who cares what you think, right?
Yep.
But if I felt like if I can honestly get to the point where, like, I'm healing and I'm sharing my story, it comes with a grain of salt. Like, I've been there.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I did therapy. I definitely did therapy for a while. So therapy, writing, sharing my story is kind of what, and faith is kind of what's gotten me to the point where I'm able to cope.
Yeah.
Because that type of grief, people always ask, like, are you healed? That you don't heal. You don't heal from losing a spouse. You don't heal from being in the NICU, and you don't heal from losing a baby. You learn to cope with it, and you learn to like ride the waves of grief, because some days, like, I feel like my heart is like always like a thump of pain, but it's not always so loud. But then there's sometimes there's random triggers, and then there's like the known triggers. Like May is like my month of grief, right? That's my wedding anniversary. You know, my husband died, my kid died, all in May. And then Colin's birthday is April. So it's like those months are like my month to do what I need to do for myself.
Yeah.
I don't pick up any extra tasks. And then a year ago, I actually quit my job. It got to the point where, like, the New Year's Day of 2022, like, I woke up, whole body hurting from stress. I'm trying to keep everything together. And because I believe when a person comes to see you at the office, you should spend as much time as they need. And the healthcare system isn't designed for that. So I found that I was always doing a lot of work at home. And even when I tried to cut down my hours, I still was doing like a lot of work at home. So when I woke up that day, like, I'm doing work, my whole body hurt, and I looked down, Colin's playing on the floor by himself. I was like, I don't have to live like this. So the first day back, I put in my resignation. And it was hard because I'd been at that office for 4.5 years. Like, I've seen like my babies grow up to toddlers. Like, there are multiple family members from the same tree. It was like one family, I took care of like 4 generations of the tree.
Wow.
And it's like you build those bonds. But I had to come to terms with, I've worked Colin's whole life, essentially. He needed me home, and I needed to take care of my own self, my own mental health. I don't know if it's just me as a person, probably me as a person, coupled with the fact of being a NICU mom, coupled with the part of being a widow. Like, I tend to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I was like, you don't have to carry so much. The load doesn't have to, it's going to be heavy, but it doesn't have to be as heavy. And so Colin and I spent 2023 traveling. And we took his first international plane. I took him to Vegas with me to see Usher. Like, and it's hard traveling with the kid with complex medical needs, like all this stuff. But I figured if I'm going to be tired at home, I'm also be tired somewhere where the sun's shining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I have been taking a deep dive into your Instagram, and you're so open and vulnerable through each post that you share. And you know, I can see that you don't sugarcoat it, right? You're gonna be real, and still you give so much hope through that, because I think that there is something to say about when you go through hard things, it is hard. Like, let's not say that it's going to be better. Let's not try to like brush it away. Like, yes, it is hard. And I think that you giving yourself the permission to say, this was hard. This is hard. This is unfair. I don't like it. I don't want it. But I'm here. Giving yourself permission to feel what you're feeling, and then also to figure out, how am I going to live with it? Because it's not going away. So how will I build a life with what I have that will honor the hurt and the pain, but also leave room and space for new experiences like traveling and seeing the world? And it's going to take 10 times more effort for me to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway, because like you said, you don't take anything for granted. I think that that is something that you do so well, of just, I know loss, and I know that I'm here and my Colin is here, and I'm gonna not take this for granted. And I think that that is something that you share so beautifully. And so I just want to say thank you for doing that, and for showing that way, you know, that there is a way, and it may not be easy, but there is a way to move forward. May that be a tiny step at a time, but there is a way to move forward. So again, just completely blown away by your story and moved by it. And just really grateful that you are sharing this perspective, because I know that there are many moms who can really relate and resonate to your journey, and are wondering, how do I do this? And so I wanted to kind of take this opportunity, because you did kind of talk on it a little bit about you guys traveling and doing all that, you know, stuff now, is, you know, Colin going to kindergarten. And you shared recently about all the things he's overcome and how proud you were of him as he's reaching this new milestone. And so I wanted to, maybe if you could briefly just touch on, like, what is on the horizon for you and Colin, and what are some of the ways that you are, you know, walking into this season of new milestones. And, you know, you are recently, you quit your job. And so what is your time filled up with now, and what are you looking forward to?
It is very hard to send your nonverbal kid out into the world without you. And so he's been in school for 2 years. This past year, pre-K 4 was the first time it's like full time, minus all of the appointments in hospitals and stuff like that. Visits. But the way, like, I prep the world for him without me is I make sure, because I don't want anybody to shortchange Colin because of what he can do. So I always lead with what he can do. Like, he knows his shapes, his colors. He's nonverbal, but he communicates well. He'll tell you exactly what he wants or doesn't want. He is a grown man in a body of a toddler, right? And I say, like, I make sure they know what he likes. I make sure they understand how he communicates. And he loves spelling. He loves counting. So, like, right now, he's where he should be math-wise. The kid can read. It's just like the physical stuff that we're working on, like the emotional regulation stuff. Like, but he's 5, so I don't know. So as we're preparing for kindergarten, had a meeting where this last IEP meeting. So we're trying to figure out, does he continue in the special ed program, or does he go over to general ed? And it's like, it's hard because academically he's where he should be, but he does have, you know, he gets overstimulated by does he really need to be in a class with 20 people? Probably not. And then we're still working on potty training. So it's kind of like those things. So I had to decide, like, okay, let's just keep him in the special ed program, but he's in the inclusion program. So he'll go to like math with the neurotypical kids, or like reading language arts. And then just like the big group, the busy areas, he'll go back to be in the special education department or class. You kind of have to surrender when you send your kid to school and trust that he will be okay. Trust that the signs that you've learned about your baby, if something's wrong, he will tell you. And I could tell he likes riding the bus. One told me he used the communication. I was like, do you love going to school? He said yes. And another is, you know how your kid behaves. You read the body language, the cues. So I'm sure I would be able to pick up on something, and maybe I wouldn't know quite what it was. But I just had to trust myself, trust Colin, and then trust the people that I am leaving him to. And they love and adore Colin. Like, I think we're like, he's bossy at school too. But the physical therapist, I met with them the day after school because they wanted to show me some things to work with Colin. And they was like, he's nonverbal, but he has no trouble advocating for himself. I was like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And then this next season professionally, I think I just decided that I'm going to work like super part-time, like maybe like 1 day a week, because I don't want to lose my skills and I don't want to lose my license. And I enjoy caring for people in that way. But I'm also trying to like explore like my passions. So I've written a children's book based off of Colin's NICU stay. So my part's done. I'm just waiting on we're just waiting on like the final, like just putting the book together, like the final, like the font and stuff like that. And then I started a podcast earlier this year, called Ask a NICU Mama. And I got the idea last year. So I just I wanted to share the knowledge that I wish somebody would have shared with me when I was in the NICU.
Yeah.
And then over the years, the NICU would like reach out. There's like this one family, the kid was born on Colin's birthday, same grades 3 for IBH with hydrocephalus, same left-sided weakness. They're just a year apart.
Oh my goodness.
And so families like that, the NICU would like reach out to me and say, hey, Ashley, can you talk to this family? Can you give them insight, and can you guide them? And so I picked up a couple of families like that over the years. And so I just wanted to be able to share like what I haven't, and then also have a place to kind of share my grief and then like my hopes with the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I'm so proud of you. That's incredible. And we'll make sure to link all of those resources in the show notes so that members of our community can connect with you and learn from you. And I hope to, Ash, that you're just incredibly proud of yourself. I mean, you have journeyed through what some people never go through. Some people go through in like a span of 30 years, but you've literally went through it in a span of 4. And so really just to commend you for all of the advocacy that you do and just the ways that you've honored your heart in the process. And it's just a true honor to hear your story and where you are today and how Colin is doing. And I think he gets a lot of his grit from you, Ash. I think he gets a lot of that drive from you. I mean, you model it daily for him. And so to just feel really proud of yourself. And it's just a true honor to get to hear these, intimate details of your story and just more about what daily life looks like for you guys. And I think it normalizes for NICU moms listening that don't have that like quintessential coming home from the hospital experience where it's like, okay, we just step into newborn life. And for NICU moms, oftentimes it's not that simple. And so thank you for sharing and using your story as a way to bring hope to other people. And so one of the ways that we love to end our episodes is just by sharing a message of hope. So to moms listening today that maybe themselves came home with a medically complex kiddo or are just navigating life after NICU for the first time, what message of hope would you offer them as we come to a close?
The occupational therapist told me towards the beginning of Colin's NICU, she told me that my sole job is to love Colin and give him all the necessary resources, and he will show me exactly what he's capable of. And so it takes the weight off of the mom, the father, the parent. Like, you're not solely responsible for Colin's ultimate level that he reaches in life. If you love him and you give him the tools, he or she will show you what they're capable of. And it may seem dark all around you now, but I promise you will find light eventually. I know sometimes it's like, especially when I first came home, it felt like you're like suffocating and you can't breathe and you don't know if you're going to make it. I just like one day at a time, one step at a time, one moment, one breath. And eventually you'll get to the point where you look back and you realize like everything that you've come through. And, you know, there's light. It may not be the light that you expected. It may not even be the color that you expected. But once you get to it, once you see it, you will, everything that you've been through, it's like you made it, right? And you'll appreciate it so much more because it took you so much longer to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ash, it's been such a joy and honor to hear your story. And I love that the internet can connect us with friends like you who we can live in completely different cities, but have the opportunity to hear your story, and the resources that you are creating for NICU families is remarkable. And so thank you so much. And really, we honor your story today, Ash, what you have navigated and what you have gone through. Just know that this sisterhood is with you, and we are honoring you and celebrating you in every single milestone that Kolin reaches and that you reach together. We're celebrating with you. And so thank you for sharing your story and for being here with us. And to our NICU mamas listening who resonate with Ashley and Kolin's story, we just hope that you feel seen and heard and validated today. And if you're still in that kind of what Ashley describes as that dark period after coming home, just know that there's nothing wrong with you. It's a very normal experience. And we know that it's frustrating because we envision coming home to be when things get easier and better, and in time they will. But if you're in that period of time where it just feels really freaking hard, just know that you're not alone. Know that your sisters have also walked through that period of darkness and that period of hard, and that we see you and we love you, and you are never, ever alone on this journey. And so we will connect with ways, or we will add links of ways to connect with Ashley in the show notes. But thank you to every one of you for listening. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we're so grateful for this community. So we'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. If you loved this episode, we'd be so grateful for a review.
For more ways to connect with the Dear NICU Mama sisterhood, check out the links in the episode description.